What's in the box? Hello and welcome to episode 6 of What's in the Box. Hi, Phil.
Hello. How you doing? You all right?
Good, how are you?
Okay, what's tonight's episode?
Tonight, we're discussing Zodiac.
Zodiac. All right, so that's Fincher's 6th film. And remember what we were saying last week about Panic Room being quite a warm film because it harked back to analog. This is definitely phase 2 Fincher. This is definitely digital. Everything about this film screams digital to me. So before we go too much further, I am Robert Downey Jr.'s natty facial hair. And opposite me is a man dressed like the Zodiac. But is he the real Zodiac or not? Nobody knows. And that's one of the problems with this film.
Thanks for labeling me as that guy.
Yeah, but one of the things about Zodiac, right, okay. Fincher's made 3 films that are based on fact. Zodiac, Social Network, and Mank. Okay? Now, without giving out too many spoilers, I actually think they're his 3 weakest films.
Really?
Yes, because he hasn't got a lot of creative license. With Zodiac in particular, he painted himself into a bit of a box. Shall I explain?
Please go ahead. Pray
Okay.
tell.
So what he decided to do when he was prepping for Zodiac was to only show attacks, killings, where there was an eyewitness account available. Okay, so the first attack we see in the film is actually Zodiac's second attack, but there were no survivors, therefore no eyewitness account to say he came at us from this angle, and everything else would then be made up. Everything else in the film is as close as humanly possible to recorded fact. I think that's a sandbox that Fincher doesn't play as well in, because he can't do his twists and turns. He can't do his I didn't see that coming, because everything that happens in this film is
fact.
What happened?
Yeah,
it's fact. It's what happened. And I think this film, and it's a long film, where you watch the director's cut of Alien 3, I watch the director's cut of this. 2 hours 43. It's only 10 minutes more, but 2 hours 43 is 2 hours 43.
That's the version I've got as well. And it's long.
Yeah, it is long, and it's long because it's like one of those unexplained mysteries series that you have on Netflix. There was a very famous killing, and it happened to this victim, and these people are involved, and you watch it for 90 minutes and it goes, and nobody was ever arrested for the crime. And that, for me, is the problem here with Zodiac, is that whilst we get a prime suspect, we don't get any kind of closure. And yet, it's true in real life, there's been no closure on the case. That's not how Fincher works. Fincher works on endings. Fight Club, The Game, Seven.
It has to have a proper. Has to have a proper 3-act structure.
He does endings. He does phenomenal starts. He does great middles as well. But he does the best endings. And you can look at all of his films, even Alien 3. It was a piece of crap. But at least he tried with the ending. He tried to make something out of it, apart from the swan dive from Sigourney Weaver. But he tried to make something out of that ending. So I think the biggest question with Zodiac is, it's not whether Zodiac is a good film or not. It's what's better, Zodiac or Mindhunter.
That's a really interesting one. My money would go towards Mindhunter.
As would mine. Because
I think there's not so much of the linear fact structure. Yes, it's still based on facts, but he has some creative license with it.
Oh yeah, quite a lot.
And I think that the sort of short arc of a series rather than the long form of Zodiac, because it's interesting you say it, because then would Zodiac have sat better as a TV series rather than a film, which is long. It's long,
Yep.
and there are parts you just sort of feel a bit. I really just need to get through this now, please.
Yeah,
To get
I could quite easily make a 2-hour cut of Zodiac. Quite easily, and I think that would be a much pacier film, because I think one of the things that this film struggles with is pace. And yes, I get why he did that. He did that to show the progression of time, how long it was between attacks, or how much effort they put into doing it. But the pace isn't right for me, and it's unusual for me to be critical of a Fincher film. But this, for me, if I hadn't seen Mindhunter, if Mindhunter didn't exist, I would be much happy with Zodiac. Yeah. And we're not going off onto TV shows because he only does. I think he only did 2 episodes of Mindhunter.
Same with House of Cards. It's name above.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really quite unfair to say which one's better. But I think what he did is he learned a lot of lessons in Zodiac and looked back at the process of making it and the final output and said, well, actually, maybe that should have been a TV show, because the story has been told in countless documentaries.
That was one thing I was going to come on to. It's a known story, well known to in America more than anywhere else. But going back to your point about the length of it and the slowness of it, is there a case now that we're seeing Fincher has proven himself in the box office, that there's not so much involvement from the studios, there's a little bit more leeway so he can get what he wants, and maybe it just sort of over-egged itself a little bit?
Yeah, but this film didn't perform at the box office.
No.
Okay. Didn't. So budget 65 million, gross worldwide 84. So that means this film made a loss. By the time you put marketing on top of the 65 budget, this film made a loss. And it's a crying shame that it made a loss when you look at all the people in it.
I mean, it's a who's who of that time. And also actors still cutting their teeth a little bit. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal was bankable talent. But still not fully fledged in Hollywood. No. Mark Ruffalo, fantastic. Robert Downey Jr., Brian Cox. I mean, that gives gravitas to anything, really.
It does, and it's a pity that some of Brian Cox's scenes ended up on the cutting floor.
Yeah,
because I could have taken out some of Jake Gyllenhaal's scenes. It's difficult when you're talking about it like this to not think we're being very negative about it. We're not. It's a very, very good film. I just don't think it's as good as Panic Room or Fight Club or even The Social Network. The Social Network, he struggles. For me, he struggles in that because it's factual. But I think The Social Network is a better film than Zodiac.
I would agree with you, actually, with that point. I do think that. I think Zodiac is probably blip's the wrong word, but probably it doesn't sit within the length, breadth, and gravitas of the rest of his output. I always see it as one of the lower points. There's another one that we'll be coming on to, which I think is his low point.
Which we both agree on.
Yeah. That's going to be an interesting podcast.
yeah. And we will be negative towards that film because there's not an awful lot I can say. Well, there are some positives, but there's not a lot.
I think what's interesting is doing a little bit of read up on this one is one fact that stood out to me as we're speaking about cast was who had input in conversations with David Fincher about who they thought were good actors at the time.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Jennifer Aniston. Now I'm trying to put together whether she was with Brad Pitt at that time or not. I can't remember. That's going way back into my brain cells.
No.
And whether it's through that Brad Pitt relationship. But yeah, she gave points on who she thought were good actors at that time. who she's quoted as saying were
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal, Mark Ruffalo. So yeah,
Mm.
interesting that Fincher's taking
That's
pointers.
interesting. That, yeah, yeah. I wonder whether they were together at that time.
Hmm.
I suppose we could have a just let me have a look at when Mr. and Mrs. Smith came out,
There's a breakup
because that
movie.
was no, because that was the breakup for them,
Yeah, it
wasn't
was.
it?
Yeah, yeah.
And not the TV show, please. I haven't watched that yet. 2005, Mr. and Mrs. Smith came out, and Zodiac came out in 2007.
Maybe not then.
Yeah, maybe not, but there or thereabouts. Depends on pre-production periods.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah. It's an interesting fact, that it really is. One of the strangest things, and this is like a really bizarre thing to know, and I do apologise for being so geek about this.
yeah.
Although the actors and characters don't change between the theatrical release and the director's cut, the credits change.
Really?
Seriously, there are actors credited in the in the theatrical cut that aren't credited in the. Sorry, there are actors credited in the director's cut that aren't credited in the theatrical cut, even though they're on scene. And Ione Skye, she played one of the victims that was abducted. She's not credited in either version.
Blimey.
And
You
you're
think-
like,
Is
What?
that an Actors Guild thing? Was there a strike at the time? God knows. That's a bizarre.
yeah.
That's a bizarre fact.
I think sometimes what happens is that people take a little bit more money for no name on there. I don't know. It's a strange one. So commercially, not a good move by Fincher, which is a shame. And I don't know. I think something changed. Let's talk about digital first. So, digital. This film is insanely digital. Just about every single shot in the film has a digital element to it. The one of the most famous ones is the street scene where Anthony Edwards and Mark Ruffalo are standing next to their cars talking, and that street doesn't exist. I think there's a few buildings there. Everything's digital. The landscapes of San Francisco are digital. There's so much digital work in it, and yeah, didn't need it. You know, I know it's a dark subject, but this film just feels freezing cold to me. There's no humanity in it.
Do you think that's the digital element, that when you describe it as that, it just reeks of George Lucas and the Star Wars re-releases to me. Sticking bits CGI for the sake of CGI. Oh, we can't do that. We'll just CGI it. That's all right.
Yeah,
which does detract from. I always think detracts from a film and the viewability of a film. I'm not a fan. Used sparingly, much like in Panic Room with the camera going through the building, through the coffee.
Yeah.
For theatrical use, I think is great. But where you're just relying on it left, right, and centre, I always think it takes you out of the film a little bit.
Yeah, the actual CGI that is in there, on the whole, is very, very well done.
Yeah,
on the whole, you don't notice it. No. But there's one shot of an overhead of the Golden Gate Bridge with cars moving across it, going across it, and they look like Scalextrics. Because there's something just not right about the scale of them as they're moving, or the way that they're moving, which was common in early 2000s CGI effects. Personally, I would have done away with the shot. I just wonder whether this film and the fact that it didn't perform at the box office, considering the breadth of talent that was in it, and considering the subject matter, which is very close to Americans' hearts, did that make him take the next film, which was just like a huge commercial, go for the awards, everybody act to the cheap seats. I don't know. Something changed after Zodiac for Fincher, and maybe Zodiac is the real end of phase one.
Oh, that's
You know,
interesting. That's interesting. So I always say Panic Room is for me, but
yeah,
like I see Zodiac as that sort of blip to the next. I see it like as a bookmark or
yeah,
bookends, sorry, to that phase, and then we get into
yeah,
the next one. Because I
yeah,
don't rank Zodiac in the canon
yeah.
much
See,
like another film that we do, which is why we're probably as listeners might say, we are struggling a little bit to find things to say about the film because there's not that much to say because it's sort of a, I don't want to say it's a nothing film, but it is that blip in Fincher's canon that just, I don't know what to say about it because it's just,
it's totally unexpected. If somebody had
yeah.
said to you after doing Seven, Fight Club, The Game, and Panic Room that he would go and make a documentary full of
Hmm,
actors, you'd go, "No, that's not going to happen,"
hmm,
because there's no way he can put Fincher on top of that. He can't put his he can put his tone, he can put his cinematic tone over it, but he can't put his cinematic mood over it.
hmm.
And he didn't. And I think he tried. Well, I think he did that deliberately. I'm not going to put my mood over this. You know, you cannot fault the acting. The acting is brilliant. You know, Robert Downey Jr. maybe a tad over the top in parts, but Mark Ruffalo and the supporting cast is a guy in it called Elias Koteas, who pops up in loads and loads and loads of films around that time. He's brilliant.
Hmm.
And the main suspect played by Arthur Lee Allen. No, John Carroll Lynch. His name's Arthur Lee Allen in the film. He went on to play Twisty the Clown in American Horror Story,
Oh my goodness, that is good knowledge. I didn't
which
equate
is
that one. Yeah.
which is one of the best American Horror Story characters.
Oh god, that
Yeah,
one is
but
that is messed up. That one.
he's been in loads of stuff. He
Yeah.
really has, and like I said before, they didn't use Brian Cox enough. You know, if you're going to have Brian Cox in your film, use him. Don't just use him to make some silly little, TV interview and then
Mm.
cut the rest of his scenes. It just doesn't. I don't know. I just don't get it. Um, for me, the nice nod in this film, which I really enjoyed because I am a huge fan of this film, Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood,
Hmm.
the first anti-hero copper.
Hmm.
Get the job done by any means, break the rules, whatever. That film is so heavily based on the Zodiac story. The killer in Dirty Harry is called Scorpio,
Hmm.
one of the Zodiac signs.
Hmm.
He sends letters in saying, if you don't pay the ransom, I'm going to I'm going to hijack a busload of kids and kill them. Pretty much carbon copy, but it's a really lovely nod that those characters go to the premiere of Dirty Harry. Yeah, I really enjoyed that bit. It was a little bit of a geek out moment for me.
Yeah. I didn't get a couple of those. I didn't equate that. So that's me learning on this podcast as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, if you get a chance to watch Dirty Harry, I thoroughly recommend it. It's not aged particularly well, but there are a lot of Zodiac killer references in there. And the character who plays Harry Callahan set up the late 70s, because it's like 1971, Dirty Harry came out. It set up the late 70s, all the way through the 80s, just into the 90s, that cop with an attitude, that cop with the fuck you mentality. I am the law. He almost definitely influenced the creation of Judge Dredd. To the fact where when they first talked about who they wanted to play Judge Dredd, it was Clint Eastwood,
Wow.
because Judge Dredd is seen there downwards. He never takes his helmet off. Yeah,
That would have
not
been
unless you
some
watch the Sylvester Stallone version.
that no. We don't talk
No,
about that.
I am the law. But yeah, Eastwood would have been the first choice to play Judge Dredd, and that would have been insane because that has just taken Harry Callahan 200 years into the future. Yeah, but the Dirty Harry films massively influenced by the Zodiac story, and the Zodiac story itself. That interest in the American serial killer, the country that has a higher the highest number of serial killers per capita than any other country in the world. Think about that. That is a terrifying stat. That when you take population size and dispersal into account, America has the highest number of serial killers. Yeah,
I'm shocked and yet not shocked.
I'm not shocked at all. Any country that says it's got the right to arm bears is just like, you're woo! Any country that continuously thinks Donald Trump is a good man, it's just like, woo! It's not intelligent, is it? So obviously that then started the how heavily influenced was Silence of the Lambs? Okay, Silence of the Lambs took from Ed Gein and Ted Bundy and serial killers like that, but did Silence of the Lambs not influenced by this film, but influenced by the Zodiac story? It's I don't know, but I run out of things to say about this film.
In some ways, when I originally heard about the Zodiac film, I thought, oh, it's sort of going to be down the same thread as Seven.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I think from a personal perspective, that put me on the back foot a little bit. And yeah, it just didn't get me like the others do. And I've also watched the director's cut. That's the version I've watched, and it felt too long. It just felt too long. It really felt like a chore to watch at points. And interesting for Fincher as well, it's a film that doesn't have a proper score. It's more about sound design and popular music. So if you look at
it's his Scorsese moment.
Yeah, it's just full of pop tunes around that time, which I get because it anchors it within a time, within a space. So I can understand them doing that. But there also was that trope of Hollywood, not at that time, but before, mostly 80s, 90s, of wanting a film to have a popular music soundtrack so it could shift CD sales as well and make money that way. It sort of used the Forrest Gump principle of music. It's used music to anchor it in a time and a place. I get that.
Yeah.
But when there's also that detachment then, if you haven't got a score to undercurrent themes, etc., I don't think it just disjointed for me is probably the word.
Yeah. I think if he had gone down the Seven route to actually fictionalize the Zodiac case and give some kind of closure to the case, so like an alternate reality kind of thing, I think it would have been a bag of crap. I honestly think he could have skipped this film. I think he could have skipped it.
Yeah, it's interesting as we start off the podcast when you're talking about he's taken a real story and that there is that before he's had scripts delivered or subject matter of a book, and now we're into that faux documentary. It's not the story's real, but the documentary style, like we're going to see in Social Network, etc. Fixed narrative because you cannot deviate from it because this is alleged to have what has happened. So you've got to stick to that story because that's the story that is known.
Yeah.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head. Is he's confined by that it's not fully linear, but linear to a point. Storytelling.
Yeah.
You've got nowhere to go.
I think a really interesting way to look at it is think to yourself, who else could have directed Seven and got the same result? I would personally say nobody.
I'd agree with you.
Okay. Who else could have directed Fight Club and got the same result?
No one.
I think nobody.
Nobody.
Okay. Who could have directed this and got the same result? Loads of people.
Yeah, I agree. It's a script that's handed to you. There you go. It's a well-known story. We want to make a film that's going to get bums on seats because people are going to want to see the dramatization of one of the most horrific events in American history.
Yeah. I don't think any director might have gone as deep into detail as Fincher did. But this, in my opinion, as controversial as it might sound, isn't a Fincher film.
No. And interesting, I don't know why this has popped into my head. Well, I'll do it away. Is if you look at directors who are worth their weight in some regards, and you look at Quentin Tarantino, he's given the source
Mm.
material of something is linear and something that did happen and is historical, and then he just completely twists it. The Sharon Tate
Exactly.
murders. I mean, my God,
Yep.
they didn't come out with a flamethrower over a swimming pool. What the hell's going on? Oh,
No,
they've
but
shot Hitler in Inglourious Basterds. You know, it's like,
but
okay,
Fincher isn't the kind. He's not the kind of director that goes whoop like
no,
that, is he? Who completely does a 180, adds fiction into the middle of it, but fiction that is so bizarre. Yeah, if Fincher had added fiction to this, he would have. The prime suspect wouldn't have died from a heart attack, would have been arrested, and would have stood trial. Yeah, that would have been the fictional ending to this, which would have given us that wraparound. And he would have added a bit of Fincher to it by it not actually being him and Zodiac killing Jake Gyllenhaal as the verdict's passed down on the guy in the court. That would have been how Fincher would have closed it as a Fincher film. But yeah, but that Tarantino film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, oh God Almighty, what a film! We're not going to start talking about Tarantino. So yeah, I think that brings a veil over, or a hood over Zodiac.
I think so. And it's like I said, we're struggling a little bit because it's one of those films that there's not really much to say about it because of its unfincherness.
Yeah, it's all public domain. There's a killer on the loose. The police are trying to find the killer, and people that the killer confronts end up either very poorly or dead.
You're probably
2
going
hours
to see the
43
Zodiac film because you know the story, so you know the
Yeah,
ending, so you're not as
yeah.
invested.
And I think the box office receipts showed that people already knew the story well enough through TV shows and documentaries and other films to say, I don't see the point in this. Which is a bit of a sad thing for a Fincher film.
It is, and I mean, critical reception wasn't that bad from the reading up I was doing it before this.
No, not at all.
It's not that bad. It's favourable. It's not 5 out of 5, but it's sort of like
No,
3, 4s out of 5.
it's pretty decent.
Yeah, they're not
decent.
slating it.
No, not
but
at
it's just one of those films that I don't know if I really want to watch it anyway because I know the story, but I'll invest in it for a little bit. But oh my goodness, is this long? Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's this Scorsese film. It's too long. It's got a pop music soundtrack.
Yeah, and I'd rather watch an episode of Mindhunter.
Yeah,
because the actors are more engrossing because I don't know what's coming next. Yeah. So, okay, then before we finish, tell the good people what next week's film is.
I've had a mind blank.
Well, it must be because you're getting old before your time.
Yeah, no,
you used to look. You used to look so young, and now you don't. Or you used to look old, and now you look young.
I just don't want to do the film. That's why I block it out. I don't want to do the film. The Curious Case of Benjamin's Buttons.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Just before we go, I take IMDb film ratings with a pinch of salt. Okay, because it's all subjective, isn't it? I don't like a film, but you might. It makes no difference. Makes no difference to the world at all. Your taste is as powerful as my taste. You have every right. Okay. Zodiac gets 7.7 on IMDb. Benjamin's Button gets 7.8.
Jeez Louise.
Okay, and I will leave you with this thought. Benjamin's Button gets 7.8 on IMDb, which is higher than the score The Game got.
I give up on people.
Yeah, okay, so I have been Robert Downey Jr.'s natty facial hair. Opposite me has been a man dressed in the Zodiac's outfit of a hood, of a dark tunic with a symbol on it. Who he is, who is that masked man? We don't know. Neither did the police. Nobody ever found out. So, it's a good night from me.
It's a good night from me.
Bye.
Toodles.